Hello Year 9, this is the second lesson in the series of lessons about the Holocaust. So we're going to look at the build-up of anti-Semitism in Nazi Germany and its impact on the Jewish people. So we already looked last lesson at what anti-Semitism is. So it's hostility or hatred or prejudice against Jewish people. And we learnt in the last lesson that Jews have been persecuted throughout their history. And obviously the worst persecution that we're going to start looking at now took place during the reign of Adolf Hitler during the 1930s and 40s. His party were called the National Socialist Party, but they came to be known as the Nazis. Their symbol was actually an ancient Hindu religious symbol, the swastika, but obviously its meaning under the Nazi regime was very, very different to its meaning for Hindus. So the Nazis had this sort of belief about themselves that the German race were a race of supermen or a master race called the Aryan race, and they didn't want certain people kind of clouding that race or diluting it or making it inferior, because there were some people that they believed were inferior. That means they thought they were lower than them, less than them. And some people they thought were so inferior or so much lower that they should be wiped out altogether. So people like the physically disabled, the mentally ill, Roma and Sinti gypsies, sort of, I suppose what you traditionally think of as gypsy people living in caravans, moving around Europe, and especially Jewish people. So as we've mentioned before, Hitler used the Jewish people as scapegoats. He blamed them for Germany's defeat in World War I. He thought it was their fault that Germany was in the situation it was in. He began to make life very hard for all Jews. He wanted to get rid of them all. He thought or came up with a scheme of perhaps moving them off to an island somewhere like Madagascar, but that wasn't practical, wasn't going to work. So the only option was mass extermination, and the word for that, sort of a mass wipeout of an entire race of people, is genocide. So it doesn't sort of start with concentration camps and death camps. It builds up slowly. So the Jewish people's rights were slowly taken away. So they started to make non-Jewish Germans look at them differently, made them stand out, made them separate, made them different to everybody else. And as we've mentioned before, a lot of Jews living in Germany thought of themselves as German first and Jewish second. They were fully assimilated, they were fully integrated, they were German, they felt German, they were German as far as everyone was concerned. But Hitler comes along and tries to convince everybody that they're not German and they are different and they are separate. And if we had in the room a group of Germans at the time, and some of them were Jewish, we wouldn't be able to tell who was Jewish and who wasn't. How are you going to know who's Jewish and who isn't? You put something on them, a label, a badge, so everybody is able to identify them. So that's what the Nazis did. So Jewish people were forced to wear the Star of David on their clothing, and it was painted on all Jewish shops. They were not allowed to marry non-Jews. So again, that's this idea of diluting this master race if it's got Jewish blood in it. Their German citizenship was taken away, so they were no longer thought as German people, and they didn't have rights anymore, and they couldn't complain about their treatment, and they couldn't vote the Nazis out because they were no longer counted as German citizens, and they wouldn't be able to vote either. So the worst violence happened on the 9th and 10th of November in 1938. A Jewish man was accused of shooting a Nazi official dead. Hitler was absolutely furious about this, and so he wants revenge, and he sends off the secret police on a rampage to attack Jewish shops, Jewish homes, synagogues. So windows were smashed, the homes and synagogues were burnt. Jews who were trying to escape from this damage done to the shops were then attacked as they were trying to flee out of burning buildings and so on. And the smashing of windows and shops, homes and synagogues was called KRISTALLNACHT, and the translation of that in English is Night of Broken Glass, because windows were smashed and broken and so on. At the top of the page, at the top of the slide, you've got 2 YouTube clips. The first one is just a very short overview of what Kristallnacht was, and the second link is to some personal testimony of people who were there at the time, Jewish people who were there at the time, and what happened to them. So, and you'll need to look at those 2 clips to answer some questions later on. So after Kristallnacht, things get even worse. Jewish people are forced to leave their homes. They're just kicked out of their homes, and sometimes you'd be in a situation where, particularly if you were a fairly wealthy Jewish person, where even probably German people or Nazis would come into your home and they'd start making themselves at home there, and they'd kick you out. So, if you imagine a home that you've lived in most of your life, and then all of a sudden it doesn't belong to you anymore, and there's nothing you can do about it, and other people are moving in and taking your home from you. And they were moved to walled areas in Polish cities, so often even German Jewish people were transported to Poland, and they had to live in ghettos. I'm not going to go too much into what ghettos were, because we're going to do a lesson on ghettos later on. This was just a temporary solution, because they were just trying to house Jews in the meantime till they worked out a way that, how they were going to solve this final solution, or how they were going to carry out the final solution. So that was the name for the Jewish, or the Nazi operation of wiping out the Jewish race, the final solution. Right, so the first task is to answer the following questions in your book. So you've got 9 questions there. If you don't have your book at home, then you can do it on paper, or you can do it on your computer or your laptop or whatever. And if you are doing it on your laptop or computer, you can save it and you can email it to me. So I'll just run through the questions quickly. What was Hitler's political party called? What was their symbol called? And then you've got to draw the symbol. Describe what the Nazis believed about themselves and the German people. Name the groups of people the Nazis thought were inferior. So, in other words, people like the Jewish people, Roman, Sinti, Gypsy. So make a list of those people. Why did Hitler hate the Jewish people? That's question number 5. 6. What is the name for mass extermination? So that's wiping out a whole race of people. Number 7. What does the name Kristallnacht mean? And then write a paragraph to explain what happened on the night of Kristallnacht. And if you watch those 2 video links, that should help you write that paragraph. Number 8. What were the walled areas of Polish cities that Jews were forced into called? And then number 9, what did the Nazis call their plan to wipe out the entire Jewish race? So go back over the slides, perhaps pause it here now, and start to answer the questions. You may have to refer back to some of the slides to look for the answers. You can either write the questions in a short answer, or you can write them as full answers. If you're writing a full answer, most of the question has to be in your answer. Okay, so moving on, we're now going to start looking at that gradual persecution against Jewish people, and how it started off gradually, and more laws are passed, and they have to start following them. Okay, so what you're going to do is read the following slides on the build-up of anti-Jewish laws, and then you're going to make a list in your book, like you can see I've got there, like a grid. So on the one side, things Jews had to do, and then things they were forbidden or not allowed to do. So, for example, Jews had to be inside their homes by 8 p.m. And things they weren't allowed to do, they were not allowed to vote. So things Jews had to do, you could also have things like they had to wear a yellow star on their outer clothing, or their coats or their jackets. Okay, things Jews were not allowed to do, sit on the same park benches as non-Jewish people. So just make a list of as many as you can from the following slides of things that they had to do and things they were not allowed to do. Okay, so from 1933 to 1941, more than 2,000 anti-Jewish laws were passed and brutally enforced in Nazi Germany. So it starts gradually. It's often people will ask, well, why didn't the Jews fight back, or why didn't they do anything about it? And I think at first they probably thought, oh, well, Hitler's not going to last long, we'll just do what he says now and everything will be fine. But it wasn't. It got worse and it got worse and it got worse. So here are just a few. So as it says, notice how subtly they build up. So they minor things to start with, and then all of a sudden Jews don't have any rights at all anymore. So in April 1933, German civil servants are sacked from their jobs. So a civil servant is someone who works in the government. So the Nazis wanted to get rid of Jews from the government, and so they sacked them. On the 16th of March 1935, they banned Jewish newspapers. So it stops Jews communicating with each other. It stops them, letting people know what's going on. 18th of August 1935, marriage between Jews and non-Jews is banned. So Jewish people are not allowed to marry non-Jews, and that could count for people who were already Jews and non-Jews in a mixed marriage. They might have to separate. Jews no longer have the right to take part in elections. So as we've already learned from looking at the civil rights movement, if you don't get a voice, if you don't get a vote, you haven't got a voice. You can't complain, you can't get people out of power who are mistreating you because you haven't got a vote, you haven't got a say in it. 2nd of July 1937, Jewish students are no longer allowed to go to German schools. They have to attend Jewish-only schools from now on. On the 13th of March 1938, Viennese Jews. So Viennese Jews are Jews from Vienna. Vienna is a city in Austria, but the Germans made Austria, or the Nazis made Austria part of Germany, and they are made to scrub the streets. So they have to scrub the streets. It's humiliating. It makes fun of them in front of everybody. Jews have to carry an ID or an identification card. So again, it's a way of making sure you can identify who Jewish people are, so you know who to mistreat and who to be horrible to. 27th of July 1938, separate park benches for Jews and non-Jews. Jews have to sit on different benches to non-Jews. 23rd of November, all Jewish businesses are closed down. Jews have to shut their businesses and hand them over to the Nazis. So there are quite a few, and these were successful businesses which will worth a lot of money, and the Jews had their businesses taken off them by the Nazis, who would carry on making money out of these businesses, and Jews were then sent to Poland, or they were sent somewhere else. 8th of December, all Jewish students are removed from German universities. 3rd of September 1939, a new law states that Jews can no longer go outside after 8 o'clock at night. So it's a curfew, it's keeping them indoors. Jews have to hand all radios over to the police. So again, it's another way of making sure they don't know what's going on, and that things can happen to them because otherwise, I suppose some Jewish people as well at that time living in Germany would listen to something like the BBC World Service, so they would get a different picture to the propaganda that was being given to the German people, so they might find out things that the Nazis didn't want them to know. 23rd of September 1939, all Polish Jews must wear a yellow Star of David on their outer clothing or their coats or their jackets. You can see examples here of the type of things that they had to wear. 29th of July 1940, Jews may no longer have telephones. Again, it's cutting them off, keeping them away from people, stopping them communicating. Jews are no longer allowed to use any form of public transport. Just take that back. Jews are no longer allowed to use any form of public transport or own a bicycle. 15th of May 1942, Jews are not allowed to keep pets. So, it's things that most of us would take for granted, being able to have a dog or a cat. But, their sort of basic dignity and freedoms are being taken away. So they're no longer being seen as decent, normal human beings that deserve to have things like a pet. Jews can no longer go to public places such as cinemas, theatres or restaurants. So again, it's restricting their freedom. Jews must hand over all electrical equipment to the police, example, hair dryers, tools. So again, it's taking away their basic sort of rights and their nice lives that they, making life really difficult for them. 20th of July 1942, all Jewish schools and synagogues are finally shut down, so Jews are no longer entitled to an education. Jews are not allowed to buy meat, eggs or milk. They're not allowed to own a house or a business. And the punishment for breaking any of these laws is death. So it was really serious. So by this point, and they will no doubt have seen people disobeying and being shot and killed right in front of them. So they'd know how serious it was. Okay, so the last task now is to design a poster that could have been placed on the wall at the time, telling Jewish people what they can and can't do. So this is the criteria. So make sure after you've done your poster that you check off these criteria and say, right, have I done this? Have I done this? Have I done it all properly? So don't just make a list. I don't just want to see a list of laws. You've already done that in the front of your book. So, use images, use pictures, think about how you're going to set it out, where you're going to put things. It may be if you are writing down you must hand in your bicycle, you might draw or find a picture, if you're doing it on a computer, find a picture of a bike and put a big red line through it. Try and make it interesting. Use plenty of examples of what they must and cannot do. So, there's loads on those slides I've just read through, so try and use as many of those as you can. Make it eye-catching. Use bold lettering, bright colours, images that illustrate what Jews can and cannot do. So, imagine if you were walking past that poster up on the wall in the city of Berlin. If it was a list of loads of words, you'd have walked past it by the time you've read the first couple of lines. So think about, having just images and things that would make a person stop and go, oh, okay. Make it clear how serious these laws are and what might happen if they're not followed. So using commands like attention all Jews. The German word for that is Achtung Juden. So you could put some German words on it if you wanted to. You must obey. Failure to obey will result in death. Really strong, show how serious it was. So you can do your poster on paper, you can do it on your computer or your laptop, or if you're going to do it in your book, take a double page, so you've got as much room as possible to include as many laws as you can. Okay, good luck with it. If you need to, go back over the PowerPoint, go back over these instructions.